Yeah, so I'll just say to everybody on the call, we don't record anything but special guest meetings. So feel free to call yourself whatever you like on your username. The recording doesn't pick up anybody's images either when we use it just on our Discord channel and so on. But yeah, take whatever precautions you feel are necessary to protect your own anonymity. But on a normal call, we don't record. That's why I need to talk about it at the moment. But we have Claudia with us today. Which is always a very, very special occasion. And yeah, most of you would be very, very familiar with Claudia. But if you're not, you may know her from her TED Talk, One Little Pill. You may have read her book, Babylon Confidential, or you may know her as the voice behind Dr. Escarpa's book, which is where I've done a lot of walking, Claudia, with you talking to me with all the science of Dr. Sinclair as the voice of the audiobook.
Well, that one was easy compared to my first novel that I did, Wolf's Empire. That one I played over 100 characters, every character in the book. And
oh, wow.
It was 23 hours of listening. The book is 23 hours on Audible. And
there you go.
Months and months to read that book. It's a Rome that never fell. It's a huge, alternate universe book. So, and my brother loved it. Actually, he was, funny enough, he was he was traveling and he listened to the whole thing while he was conquering jet lag, and said it helped him a lot. So yeah, those are tricky doing books on tape, because you don't want to go too big, but you also don't want people to sleep.
Yeah, that's right. It's an art form. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and some I find that I just cannot listen to. But your work on Dr. Escarpa's book was perfect. I really enjoy walking around and listening to it. It's some heavy going, but you're reading as the book is. So I just wanted to say to everybody who's with us, obviously welcome. And this is an opportunity to speak directly to Claudia. So feel free to post any questions that you have in the chat, and then I will connect you with Claudia as we go on. While we do that though, Claudia, I thought I'd kick off with a few questions. But when people come to our group or to TSM generally, almost without exception, people will say a phrase that is, I found Claudia's TED Talk, boom, boom, boom. Do you know how many views it's got on YouTube at the moment?
I think almost 5 million. So I think the fact that so many medical groups use it also on their websites, and other people have been using it, I think combined and everything, it's about 5 million. That was
correct.
It was a really wonderful thing. Somebody nominated me for that TED Talk at the London School of Business, and they made me the keynote speaker. So that has been such a gift. It really has been. It's remarkable how many people have seen that, and I'm very grateful that it comes up in searches so often. So I've said this before many times, like a broken record, but I kind of wish I could do a second one, because I actually applied to the Huntington Beach one and I was turned down, because I want to do a second one based on medication assisted treatment for people, but also underlying issues and dealing with all of that, and not hit so heavy on the biological aspect only of recovery. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe someday I'll get that opportunity. I did during the pandemic. I did record a TED Talk that I had written, and that was just on so that other people could get an idea of what it felt like to have an addiction. So
yeah,
I think it was called "What Your Brain Feels Like When It's Hijacked."
Okay. Yeah, because I'd love to know a little bit more about that backstory, because I've listened to that TED Talk on several occasions. But I'd love to know, what was the backstory? How long ago was that recorded? I think 6 or 7 years.
It was 20, and I wrote this speech. It was 2016. It took me a long time to write it and to memorize it. But then I had a huge chunk in the middle of it where I talked about SAMHSA and I was pretty, it was an important part of the talk to me, because I really wanted people to know how ridiculous it was that this wasn't considered evidence-based, and that was really prohibiting people from getting the treatment they needed. At this point, you have to understand there weren't a lot of providers so this was really, telemedicine helped us during the pandemic get the entire country covered. But up until then, 2016, there were still people constantly clamoring to get naltrexone or nalmefene. This was not readily accessible. And so I had a chunk in the middle of my TED talk that was really berating the US judicial system and also the US, mass recovery system and the multi-billion-dollar rehab industry and the legal system. And I mean, a whole bunch of things I went after. And they said to me right before my talk, they said, "You will never make it to the main stage if you leave that in your talk." So I had to edit my TED talk like 10 minutes before doing it in my head. So it's so interesting because people can't see it, but I can see exactly in the talk where I just forget where I am. And you can see this momentary look of panic in my face. And then I pick up. Thank God, I pick up and I keep going but at that point I'm standing on stage, and because I had edited all that stuff out, I forgot where to go from there. When you rehearse it all as one chunk. And I'm pretty quick on my feet, but that threw me. And luckily I didn't screw it up, but I can see when I can't watch it. It makes me so uncomfortable because I can see where I go up and I don't remember where to go. But anyway, it was in the long run, it was wonderful. I'm glad that they allowed me to do it. I'm glad they made me the keynote speaker, and they sort of not advertised it, but they got it in some sort of Google search. So people found it, and it's helped a lot of people at least know about the Sinclair method.
Absolutely. I think it's been a gateway into a lot of people's TSM research journey.
Yeah.
Because when they first start to search TSM, that seems to be one of the first things that comes up. And yeah, as I was saying, people tend to say, "I found Claudia's TED talk, and then I did this, and I did this, and I did this," and they went off into the rabbit hole that is TSM research. That leads us onto a wonderful, wonderful journey.
So much. Yes. I mean, there's so many videos on TSM on YouTube with so many different people that have been making their own videos, Katie and I mean, just a ton of people. So it's wonderful. I'm glad that people can see people of all ages and types online and get a sense of how many people it's helped, real people.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody said in the chat that TED talk changed my life. And that's the case for me, 100%. That was the first thing I saw.
Well, I sent many, many thank yous to the London School of Business, just telling them how many people's lives they touched and saved by allowing me to say that talk, by allowing me to do it and filming it and putting it out in the world. I really give thanks to them. It was them. They took the chance.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. No, hopefully they give you another opportunity to do that as well, and it becomes another asset for the entire community.
Yeah.
So yes, to anybody in the chat, again, I say, please ask any questions that you have on your mind. It's a wonderful opportunity. And I've got a few that pop up in our conversations on a regular basis. But one of those is around comparisons between journeys. So people are having their own experience and they're seeing this change and they're really happy with the change that they've got, but they'll often say, "But I feel like I should be more advanced than what I am," or "but this, but that." I'd love your experience around people comparing journeys.
Let's compare this to, I compare it to my career as an actress. I look at people on television and I say, how come I'm not playing that role? How come she got that opportunity? I mean, everybody's journey is different, whether it's in recovery or business or whatever. But specifically in TSM, you have to understand that your drinking history and your wiring of your particular brain and your habits and triggers and memories and also your trauma is completely different than anybody else's. You are unique. You are special. The beautiful thing about TSM is that it will affect hopefully with everybody, positively the biological aspect of addiction. So for everybody, they should see a reduction of alcohol, a reduction of cravings, if they are responsive to naltrexone or nalmefene. So in that regard, it is a one size fits all. But in every single other regard, it is not. First of all, why would a mother with 3 young children respond the same as a single person who's in a quiet environment, you know, who isn't juggling a whole bunch of stuff? Let's say you have a writer sitting at home who works from home and doesn't have any alcohol in the house, compared to now the 26-year-old who's a bartender, compared to a young, like I said, a young mother with 3 kids that are stressing her out. All of these people have completely different life experiences as well. So then you add on to that their different chemistry, their different reaction to naltrexone, their different responses to trauma, memories, triggers, and you have a completely different experience. So never compare yourself to somebody else. I mean, in some way I had it difficult, but I had it easy because I had no one to compare my experience with. You know, I was just, Dr. Sinclair just said, take the pill, wait an hour and drink. That was it. So that's the only experience I had. Nowadays, you have people saying, oh, I took it once and I'm cured. No, you're not. You know, and you have people who are in 6 months, they've reduced their drinking 95%, but then they relapse 2 months later. Why? Because they didn't change their habits, or they didn't work on their underlying issues of trauma. They didn't change their environment. They just thought the pill would do all the work. So take everything with a grain of salt. I always tell people, when you look online, do not take medical advice, do not take TSM advice. Take your advice from the experts, take your advice from the book, take your advice from your doctor that is well versed in TSM. Don't take any advice from people online. They mean well. Everybody wants you all to have a great experience, but it's just going to confuse you. If you're keeping your drink log and you're being mindful and you're adhering to the medication protocol, you're doing great. And it's just going to take time. The average time, I told you, I've mentioned this a few times, when we did our little informal data experience, we found that the average person takes 9 to 12 months. It's not 3 to 4 months. And that's my bad, because I happen to reach a psychological indifference to alcohol before the 4-month mark. And I mentioned that in my TED talk. So then everybody, that's like the gold standard, like, well, in 4 months, I have to reach extinction. Well, I also had a lot of bumps in my 9 years on TSM because I didn't do the work. I didn't do the underlying work. So when you see that biological fix in 4 months, that's an anomaly that happens to some people. But the majority of people, their brain takes 9 to 12 months to really, truly rewire itself.
Yeah, that's a really good thing for people to be able to hang their hat on around that 9 to 12 months, because I do hear the 3 months pop up, and I think it may be referenced in the book, and I think you may have quickly referenced it in the TED talk. And the experience that I see among most people at about 9 to 12 months, which is still incredibly short in recovery circles, incredibly short.
Dave, we talked about this as well. Dr. Sinclair worked with rats. Rats don't have to take their kids to school. Rats aren't going through a divorce. Rats aren't, didn't have a death in the family. That's another thing is, yeah, the rats got better in 3 to 4 months, but you've got to add in all of the rest of the stuff. A pandemic, you lose your job, you work in a alcohol related, industry, you're in hospitality, you're a funeral director, whatever. The rats didn't have all that stuff. So yes, the average time span during the experiments and during the clinical trials was 3 to 4 months. But then also you have to take into consideration that those people were being, the humans that were in those studies were being watched over all the time and being managed by a medical team. So it's not the same as the guy who goes to Mexico and forgets his medication. And now it takes him 9 months to reach extinction. So, human fallibility has a lot to do with the time. Not changing your habits, having unrealistic expectations. Also, once again, we've said this numerous times, but it's worth saying again. It took you many, many years to learn this behavior. It's going to take you a little while to unlearn it. You didn't go down to the bar, have one beer, and suddenly get in this issue that you are right now, the situation that you're in right now. It was years and years of those neural pathways getting more and more engorged and more heightened, and your response to alcohol getting, your reinforcement getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So of course it's going to take a little while to undo, just like weight loss. If you lose 20 pounds in a month, you're more likely to gain it back. If you lose a half a pound a week, you're more likely to keep it off. That's just the way it works.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Sustainable habit change becomes critically important.
90 days to have it actually sort of changed. Not going to happen overnight.
Exactly. And Hannah, you had a question that you placed in the chat. I'll just click on you and you can ask that directly.
Hello. Hey, Claudia.
Hi, Hannah.
Hello. So I just always love so much about you, one of which is the longevity and the wisdom that you've cultivated from your experience with that, just starting with that pamphlet about Vivitrol, and that led you to naltrexone, and here we all are. So within kind of the context of how long you've been involved, if I was to ask you how to reflect on TSM today, what thoughts come to mind?
If you were to ask me what?
To reflect on TSM today.
Oh,
like obviously the changes have been significant since you came across it,
Yeah. I think the most significant change has been the advent of telemedicine companies having comprehensive programs, and also doctors more readily prescribing it, but for-profit businesses springing up everywhere. I just heard today there's a woman who trained with me as a coach, and she's having a bitch of a time getting it in her country, but she was just asked by a company in the UK to join them, so now there's another company in the UK trying it. Plus we have 2 other coaches that are starting another company in the UK, a for-profit business, which I think is great. We didn't have any of that. When I reflect upon it, there also weren't the tools and the support. So now you have YouTube channels and videos. We had a podcast. We have had a few conferences, which unfortunately, due to financial constraints, we can't do any more conferences or podcasts, which sucks. But there are other people taking up the helm and producing content for people to find out everything. If you look at the C3 Foundation YouTube channel, you can literally find a video on any aspect of the Sinclair method. I mean, nausea to habits to triggers to what to do when you're planning goals, everything. We have doctors on there, we have specialists on there, we have therapists on there, we have regular people who've been on the Sinclair method. There's so much content on that channel, that one channel alone, just C3 Foundations, that anybody nowadays can find out pretty much anything about TSM, whereas before, like me, all I had was a book. I didn't have a movie. I didn't have Journeys, my second book, which was actually I would have loved to read Journeys when I started TSM, because it's just chock full of other people's stories on TSM. So I could have really gotten the lay of the land and found out, aha, this is what happens when you don't take the medication after being on it for 2 years. This is what happens when you relapse and you relearn the addiction overnight. This is what happens when you're not mindful, or you don't change your habits. So I wish I would have had things like that. But when I look back, everybody, and once again, this has been said ad nauseum, but I'll say it again. Everybody always says, why haven't I ever heard of it? But you have to really see it from my perspective, starting it in 2009 and having zero support, zero resources, nothing but a book. That's all I had. And now you have all of this wonderful stuff, including these meetings. So thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody, for these TSM meetups. No, seriously, I mean, I would have loved to have joined a meeting. I would have loved to have spoken to somebody else who was on TSM. There was nobody. All my family and friends thought I was a freak. Nobody could find any information on it. They thought I was a lunatic. They were like, oh, the cure for alcoholism? That's a load of crap. They're looking at the title of the book and they're thinking I'm like, in some sort of brainwash thing, I've joined a cult or something. And she's taking a pill and drinking. I mean, it was crazy talk. And imagine me at my first Christmas with my family having a drink in front of them and saying, no, I took my meds. I mean, everybody thought I was crazy until they actually saw that my drinking was reducing and that I wasn't hammered. That I would stop after 1 or 2 drinks. So it really was. But I mean, imagine how hard that was for them to embrace, because there were no videos and no one little pill and no nothing for them to compare that to. They just knew their daughter or sister or girlfriend was doing this weird thing that one guy in South Africa wrote about. So yeah, things have changed, Hannah. Significantly.
Yeah.
And for the better.
100%. And you have been the driving force behind so much of that change. Having spent time in AA and realizing the benefit I got from the fellowship of being around people who actually understood the condition was amazing. So then, hence, I want to develop this community in any way that I possibly can, because we have science and the fellowship around the journey that comes with it. And that's something that I'm hoping I can contribute to in whatever small way I can.
Well, people like you and Hannah and Katie and Gary Bell and all of anyone who's contributed, even if it was an interview or they became a coach or they just took the training so they could help friends and family or whatever. Every single one of you that's making an effort to help other people or at least spread the word of TSM is helping this whole movement. Every single one of you is helping this movement. Those of you who choose to be private about it, that's fine too. If you have a pressing need for privacy, I totally understand that. But for those of you who aren't afraid to speak out or who want to change the world and go to your doctor and say, listen, this is working for me. You're crazy to prescribe it with abstinence every morning. It doesn't work that way. Trust me, I've tried it both ways. Or for those of you who go back to your doctor and say, you know what, I ordered it online like I did, and it works, and it was malpractice for you not to give it to me. I mean, I did that and I fired my doctor because of that, because he refused me the medication. And I went to another doctor and then he started giving it to his patients. And lo and behold, he's got 60 people on it. So it's like that's what you do. You get angry and you make changes and you make videos. And if you're a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 70-year-old, you get a little video, use your cell phone and say, hey, I'm doing this method and it's fantastic. And you put it on your Facebook page. You never know who's going to see it. Even the tiniest little thing, you never know who's going to see it. I know that every time I do a podcast or a radio show or whatever, and I bring up TSM, somebody who needs it is going to hear it. Somebody. And if that one person hears it, or it's for their sister or their ex-husband or whoever it is, somebody's going to be helped. And that's what you have to think of every time you go to a party and you talk about it. You're helping save lives, period. We are all warriors here, all crusaders. We're all heroes. Everybody who spreads the word and pays it forward is an absolute hero. This is a movement. We have to continue it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful point. Wonderful point. And Tom, you had a question that you wanted to ask as well. Let me just get to you, Tom. You can unmute and speak directly to Claudia.
Yeah, Claudia, that was kind of my point. I ran into a guy at brunch on Sunday, a guy I know in my building that's been having a drinking problem, and he's kind of a friend and whatever, but he told me something happened, some recent time ago, and he's been dry for 5 weeks. And, I was like, congratulations, that's good. But I also, I said to him, listen, I'm doing a thing too. And, I told him just a couple of moments about it. And what I sent him was your TED Talk, because he did ask me, like, send me what you're doing. And your TED Talk is the most succinct thing that I've found. It's not the book, it's not the movie. It's 15 minutes of, it's what lured me in and everybody else. So
I also suggest to everybody, Tom, that's great that you said that. I just suggest in the very gentlest way to tell them to get the prescription for naltrexone, because
Yeah.
inevitably the cravings are going to start. They're going to kick in. We all know that the honeymoon period of sobriety wears off usually around the 2-month mark. It's usually between 30 and 60 days when suddenly those insidious thoughts start again. And if you have the prescription already, you're not going to relapse.
Right. You know, at brunch in a restaurant, I'm not going to be like, hey, there's this drug naltrexone. Your video pretty much kind of like lays it down, kind of, yeah. So that advocacy, those people that, you know, for some of us, we've spent 20 years around a lot of our friends that are heavy drinkers. You know, some got better and some are still going strong. So that's really important to me, is to help people that I'm finding something that works. I'm only 3 months in. But I really want to be able to say to people, listen, this is what I got. And that's very easy for my friends. But there's, you know, I've been in AA meetings and I'm like, why have I never heard of anything like this? You know, there's so many people that I'm going to meet them on the street. I might even meet them in a bar. You know, I actually think about like making a little like card and being like, you know,
Yeah, I used to
this
do
is the
that.
thing.
I had little cards I made in the beginning and that I used to give out at my old AA meetings, because so many people were dropping out of the meetings. So I would go around with my little cards and say, ask me about TSM. And then I had my phone number on it and I would just leave it there. And, you know, you're afraid of relapsing, or, I would hand it to people, or I just hand out my card and say, you know, give me a call if you think you're craving or you're going to relapse.
Right.
It wasn't like I'm trying to steal people from AA, but I did it at churches and I did it, I just did it wherever. I put some in I actually had a liquor store in Texas that was going to put my cards out there.
That's not a bad idea. Why not?
No.
At the casino, they tell you if you have a problem with gambling, call this number. Why
Yes.
not?
And they should
Absolutely.
have that, because actually naltrexone works for gambling too. So they should have the Sinclair Method up in casinos. It works beautifully for gambling. I noticed a lot of people in the chat talking about places where they are getting their naltrexone. I just want to specify that Monument will not support you doing the Sinclair Method, but you can get naltrexone there. I saw the mention of Monument. I've heard a lot of people reach out to me saying that they actively do not support the Sinclair Method. So if that's changed, let me know. But as far as I know, Monument does not support TSM, but they will give you a prescription for naltrexone. Anyway.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because you mentioned something before about going to a doctor and then you fired your doctor. And a lot of people, when they come onto our meetings, one of our first questions is, do you have reliable access to naltrexone? Because if you don't have that, you can't be compliant. If you can't be compliant, then you can't do all the other elements as well. Yeah. And we tend to recommend push into that doctor, but otherwise find another one.
Find another one. Yeah.
I always say that Claudia and the C3 Foundation have done an amazing amount of work, particularly if you're in North America, where you shouldn't have to tolerate a doctor that won't provide naltrexone. No,
you should not have to tolerate them, especially if you're doing well on it and they're not listening to you. There's an interesting question. Can I jump in there, Dave? There was a question from a Valeria. Is that all right?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Valeria, I'm sorry. The question is gone now. Let me scroll. Valerie, how would you recommend talking to family about restarting TSM when they've seen it fail due to user error on compliant drinking? That's a really good question, and I wanted to jump on that one. I have made lots of videos talking about my relapse in year 5 and the reasons behind it. And I think that it would be incredibly important for you, and this would be a really great time for you to open up a line of communication with your family members about the complexity of recovery, that it's not just a biological fix, and that one learns a lot through relapses. And I'm not recommending them. It's sometimes more difficult to get back on TSM. After the first relapse, like the second, third, fourth time, sometimes it's more difficult to get back into the swing of things. But this is a really good opportunity for you to talk to them about what your triggers are, for you to set boundaries, for you to start really diving deep as to why you drank without the protection of naltrexone, if you were comfort seeking, or if you were trying to get a specific feeling from the alcohol, or if somebody triggered you. All of these things are part of recovery. It's not just about popping the pill. So if somebody is judging you because they think the Sinclair method doesn't work, which is, I had the same thing happen when I relapsed. Everyone was like, well, what? It doesn't work, clearly. And I was like, no, I didn't work it correctly. I was the one who didn't take the tablet. It worked beautifully for 4.5 years. It was perfect until I screwed up. So you have to explain to them that you're human, you're fallible, and that recovery is not a linear experience, that there will be bumps in the road, that you believe in this method, and that it was working for you, and it was your fault. You didn't take the medication and you're getting back on it, and that you believe in it, and you're asking them for their support and their patience and their love and their understanding. And I think by doing this, by being really open about it and honest about it, and I remember having that chat with my dad, who was in my documentary, One Little Pill. And I said, Dad, it does work. I screwed up, and he was so upset because he saw how well I was doing and he didn't understand it. And we had a really good talk. I said, I was really burnt out and I wasn't taking care of myself and I wasn't doing the things I love to do because I was on this mission to save everybody. And that opened up a conversation between the two of us, of him saying, look, you don't owe that to anybody. What you owe is to yourself, to take care of yourself, because you're the face of this now. You can't screw up. You're responsible. And as much as that hurt, he was right. He said, you have a responsibility to walk this path. You also have a responsibility now to tell everybody on TSM that you relapsed. And he's the one that said, you've got to come out sooner than later. And you've got to tell people that you relapsed, because now they won't feel so bad when they do it. And then you're going to be the face of that honesty. He said, we have to be honest in recovery. He said, because people like me don't understand it. I don't understand addiction, Claudia. I've got 2 kids that are addicts. I don't understand it. And so that opened up a really beautiful conversation between my father and I. And it was a conversation between you and your family members. Anybody who loves you, Valerie, wants you to get better. Anybody who loves you will support you, as long as you're making that effort to get back on TSM and you're doing it correctly and you revisit why you didn't comply. They can't do that for you, but you need to sit and understand why you didn't comply. You have to do a quick inventory of that and say, why didn't I comply? What compelled me to do this when it was working well for me? And so that's part of the process of recovery. That's part of the self-exploration of recovery that a lot of us ignore, and it bites us in the butt.
Yeah. Did you want to respond quickly to that advice, Valerie? You're unmuted. Oh, you were?
Did she go away?
No, sorry. I think somebody might have. It's all good.
Yeah, sorry. I would like to respond. Yeah, no, I was doing so well until I wasn't. And, one of the reasons I was non-compliant is I sleepwalk, and we used to keep alcohol in the house. And so that's an easy one.
Right. You mean, are you there?
If it's not in the house and I sleepwalk, I had several bad to drink non-compliantly. But I've also done a lot of mental health work, and right now I'm just abstinent and I'm fine with it. I just left a huge event that normally I would have been drinking all night and I didn't even care. But I am aware that the honeymoon is going to wear off.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to have an ugly relapse that puts my family through torture. But I also have several people who love me dearly and would do anything for me, who now are convinced that while they'll tell you they've researched TSM and it works, they just believe wholeheartedly it'll never work for me.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm running into.
Well, if it's triggering you, and you can sort of stay away from those particular people, or you can express to them that, it's not helpful for you right now during your recovery. to not have their support. And if you can't have their support, then you can't spend time with them. If it's somebody in your immediate household, you're just going to have that conversation of saying, look, I screwed up, not the method. The method didn't screw up. I screwed up. That's plain and clear. And you need to give me another opportunity to, I always say to people, didn't you see it working on me? That's what I said. I said, you saw it working. They said, yes. I said, okay, well, if I was a diabetic and I stopped taking my insulin, I would go into diabetic shock if I was eating a bunch of sugar, right? So clearly that would have been my medical issue, my problem, my lack of compliance. It was the same thing as the Sinclair method. It's a medication assisted treatment. So you didn't comply with it, and they should understand that, you know, you're back on it and you need support. If they don't, then you have to, you know, bounce, as they say.
Thanks for taking the time to respond. I appreciate it.
Of course, it was a great question.
Thanks very much, Valerie. And I'll switch over to Dana. So Dana's relatively early on TSM and had a number of questions and would certainly benefit from your advice. I'll ask you to unmute, Dana, and feel free to ask directly.
Hi there, Claudia. It's very nice to see your beautiful face. So I have been dealing with a doctor online who's been prescribing the naltrexone for me because it's kind of poo-pooed in this area. But my husband did a lot of research and was able to get me somebody who was able to prescribe the medication for me. He's also been prescribing me Ativan. Now, mind you, I was a pretty heavy vodka drinker, and I was vomiting every single solitary morning before work, and it was just really, really awful. I was super uncomfortable. Weekends, I would just sleep the whole time. So we just decided, or one weekend, I just kind of put myself through the ringer and just went through withdrawals, had a little bit of wine, completely took myself away from the vodka, was very, very good on the naltrexone. Started drinking wine because I thought, because I didn't like it as much, that I would, you know, be able to stop drinking quicker or faster. But now I'm back into loving my wine. I am not vomiting in the morning, but it's kind of, I went, you know, what, 2 weeks, Dave?
Yeah.
Doing really, really well, cutting my drinking in half to slowly, you know, getting back up into the numbers that I really don't want to get back into. And I don't want to replace one medication with another medication. The Ativan seems to help me with my anxiety because I do have pretty significant anxiety in the morning. And I don't know if it's necessarily a mental thing, but what do you think, you know, how long, I know you're not a doctor and you can't recommend those kinds of things, but how long would you recommend somebody taking naltrexone with Ativan, or should I, you know, ask the doctor for something different to
How
help?
long have you been doing TSM?
What, 3 months?
Well,
Oh.
compliantly, we've been doing TSM for a month. This is our 5th week, but she's been prescribed naltrexone
For a year.
wrongly since
Correct.
June. Just,
Yes.
you know, the whole take it and yeah. So.
Yeah, so my primary care physician prescribed it to me once in the morning, once at night, but nothing along with the Sinclair method. It was just like taking my blood pressure medication.
Right. Okay, so 5 weeks of doing it correctly at 50 milligrams, and it sounds to me, and you've gotten rid of the hard alcohol, which is really great. It's very important. 5 weeks is way too early in the game to make a judgment if this is working for you or not. If you had an initial response where you reduced your drinking and you're not, you know, drinking 24 hours a day and not throwing up in the morning, that's some improvement. I understand you'd like to see a bigger improvement overnight, but that's probably not going to happen. There's also the question of your metabolism. If you were taking 100 milligrams before per day and you were still drinking quite a bit, you might actually need eventually to speak to your doctor about having a higher dose. As far as the Ativan goes, what I've heard from a lot of people is once they do once their drinking starts to diminish and cut down, their anxiety cuts down, because what you're feeling quite often in the morning is withdrawal, and that
Yes.
produces a huge amount of anxiety, huge amount of cortisol. That's a completely natural thing that happens when you're withdrawing from alcohol. The sugar in wine will also create anxiety and cortisol, and all that can be helped with flushing the naltrexone and the alcohol out of your system with a lot of water, with eating small amounts of protein at least 6 times a day. That means if you eat animal lean proteins or dairy, or if you're a vegan, you're going to have to do it with beans and protein shakes and all sorts of things like that. But you've got to keep those protein levels up. You probably also have to do a little brain repair, Dana. You probably have to up your fish oil, your vitamin Bs. You have to really replenish the brain health. You're out of whack. That's what happens when you're not balanced. You also, how old are you?
40.
45.
No, I'm not. I'm 43. 43.
43, you should also
I think.
probably get your hormones checked, and your thyroid, and get a full blood panel done, just to make sure that everything is heading towards a place of balance. So you've got to work on your diet, you've got to work on all of that stuff, and eventually I'm sure you probably will be able to remove the Ativan. In response to people wanting, and you wanting to see a bigger response, you have to start asking yourself at this 5-week mark, why is my drinking increasing? What am I getting from drinking? I know you say, I like my wine, but your goal overall is to reduce drinking. Are you being mindful? Are you keeping a drink log? Are you not only joining these meetings, but also asking yourself after every drink, do I need another one? Why? Are you journaling? Are you getting some therapy? These underlying issues, and this is not me putting you in the hot seat at all. I'm asking you these questions because these are things that I didn't do, okay, in the beginning. And I would have been on TSM a lot less time if I would have done those things. As it turns out, it took me 9 years to get off of alcohol on the Sinclair Method. And I'm just telling everybody out there, not just you, I'm not putting you in the hot seat. I'm telling everybody out there, you've got to do all of the rest of the things that are so important in recovery, which is understanding why we drink. What are my relationships like? Do I set boundaries? Do I communicate well with my spouse, my children, my family, my loved ones? Do I have underlying trauma? Is that the reason why I'm drinking? Am I bored? Am I unhappy with my life? Why am I drinking? What is this? What is this seeking? What am I seeking with the alcohol? Anybody who is, and I know this stands for me too, because I was a wine drinker, and at one point it no longer had its effect, and I would have drunk anything. I mean, I took mouthwash at one point just so I wouldn't withdraw. We all know, those of us who have been physically dependent on ethanol know the horrors of withdrawal. And quite often the only reason why we drink is to avoid withdrawal. So if you're at the point now where you're sort of getting out of the withdrawal phases, you still probably are not completely healthy. And I mean that in the most respectful way. I mean that in saying that your body is still not balanced. Your brain certainly is not. You probably don't have your sleep back in any normal way. And
Not at all.
Yeah. So it's going to take time, Dana. And I'm not being patronizing when I say that at all. I'm
Please.
just saying,
You're not patronizing me at all. I appreciate every word that's coming out of your mouth.
it's just going to take time. And 5 weeks in of finally doing it right. And you've had this long haul of taking it twice a day. You might want to consider, if you're frustrated with your drinking levels right now, you might want to talk to your doctor and say, can I try 75 milligrams or 100 milligrams just to see if it makes any difference in my desire to drink? Because sometimes in the beginning, when somebody's been taking naltrexone with abstinence or twice a day in the past, sometimes they need a little bit of a higher dose because they've developed a tolerance to it. Other people need it because their metabolism is so fast. They're hyperactive. There's a myriad of reasons why you could need a higher dose. So that's something you could definitely try. I'm not telling you to try it. I'm telling you to ask your medical professional to advise that. But there's no reason why, for safety and all that stuff, that you couldn't give that a shot if you think that your drinking is escalating. But at the same time, you cannot rely on the medication alone. You've got to do the rest of these things that I mentioned. the tracking of the drinks, the drink log, the asking yourself, why do I need another drink? The wondering if am I drinking because I'm hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or bored? Not reasons to drink. Have I had an alcohol-free day? And on that alcohol-free day, did I actually work out or take a walk or play with my kids or do something that helped the dopamine balance in my brain? You need, remember the Sinclair method is a dual therapy. On the days that you do not drink and do not take naltrexone, you wash out your system and you engage in good endorphin producing activities. That way your brain will become balanced. So you need to think about nutrition. You need to think about getting out in nature. You need, anytime that anxiety shows up, that is withdrawal from alcohol, that thing in your heart, that feeling, I used to know it so well. My brother taught me, because he was also an alcohol addict. He said, go for a walk, Claude, get the heart rate up, go for a walk, go for a walk. And he'd come over and he would walk me. He would make me walk up hills, because the second you get your heart rate go up a little bit, comes down. And that's another great thing to do in the late afternoon so you can sleep better. It's a great thing to do throughout the day when you're craving. Go out and take a little walk, get your heart rate up. It helps so many different things in your body and brain. So that's something else to keep in mind. Have your spouse say, let's go for a walk. Take your dog.
I do all the time, Claudia. Thank you.
Good. No, that's great. That's great. Dana needs it. You got to do that, because the more you walk it off, the better you're going to feel and the less you're going to need the Ativan. I'm telling you, trust me. I thought I had an anxiety problem. It was alcohol problem. It wasn't an alcohol problem. I don't have any anxiety, it was alcohol related. So I'm not poo-pooing anybody out there who legitimately has anxiety disorder. Please don't, I'm not being disrespectful. I'm just saying a lot of anxiety is tied to alcohol misuse. And the more your brain becomes balanced, the better you will feel. Please keep in mind that as Dr. Umhau and all these other doctors talk about nutritional value for the brain. That's the fish oils, there's the vitamin D, vitamin Bs, really nutritious food, those greens, those lean proteins. You've got to rebalance your brain with good nutrition, exercise, and support and love, and also loving yourself. So it sounds overwhelming at times, and everything can be overwhelming when you're in the midst of the beginning of recovery, or when you're in the midst of a binge, or when you're withdrawing. Anybody out there who's actually suffering right now in the middle of a bender, it can feel like even the simplest thing of taking, like sending an email or taking a walk, just seems overwhelming. I don't even know how to do that. Trust me, just take baby steps, do something good for yourself, take care of yourself in some way. If that's making a decent meal or shoving some food down your throat because you haven't eaten in 3 days, do it. Do it. These are small steps for some people. And so other people are on different paths right now. But you, Dana, week 5, you're doing fine. You're doing great as long as you're complying. Now you can add the drink log app, the nutrition for the brain, the walks. Your husband or spouse or partner sounds like he's doing that, and lots of love and support, and you'll get through it. And think about the higher dose. Ask your doctor if you can take a higher dose if you're worried about your drinking escalating this soon in the process. Okay.
Thank you, Claudia. That was magnificently given. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
I really want you to succeed at this, and clearly you've got a lot of love surrounding you. So just be good to yourself. And that's for everybody out there. I know I say this, but you gotta forgive yourself. You can't beat yourself up. It's not helpful in recovery. This is already painful enough. You've got to forgive you. You did not choose this to happen to you, and you're doing something about it. So be kind to yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Dana and Dave. Yeah, Dave is a model support partner for anybody who's looking to provide that to somebody new into TSM. So you touched on that, and it was a question I was going to ask you later. Supplementation and diet and exercise, and how that relates to an AUD journey. If you can dig into that even further, because I think it's something everyone can do. It's relatively cheap. They're non-prescription things.
Yes. And I'm just looking this up right now, but I think Jenny posted it. I did an entire nutritional class video, and I think we're selling it for like a couple of bucks on C3 Foundation. I literally decided to create an entire class. Let me see if it's on there under the resources page. I'd be curious if she posted it. Yeah, nutrition and supplement video. Pay what you can. $5. It's the last thing. It's the last thing on the free foundation. It's a half-hour video. I talk about all the nutrition and supplemental aspects of recovery on the Sinclair method. So it's a video. You can watch it. It's a half an hour long. And I get deeply into that.
Fantastic. Well, we will, if I can ask one of the co-hosts to try and dig that up and just put a link
I'll
into the
send it
chat.
to you.
That I'll
Here,
yeah.
who should I tell it to?
One of the co-hosts should be able to locate it, but yeah, and then we'll jump on to the next question, but we'll find it. We'll make sure it's in the chat with a link, because it's one of those things that you don't need to get a prescription for, but there's all this supplementation. And you mentioned Dr. John Umhow, who's done interviews with you and Katie before, and yeah, such great advice.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Hannah, are you still on? Is Hannah still?
She will be, but she won't be able to unmute.
Yeah, I just emailed it to Hannah. She can post it.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I just emailed. It's the only
Excellent.
email address I can remember.
So I'm going to Moira. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm Australian, so most people think I pronounce things not correctly. You had a question about hard alcohol and why it's not advisable. Do you want to ask that directly?
Sure, thank you. So I'm not, I'm very, very new to this and sort of worried about whether it works or not. I drink hard alcohol and I drink daily. And so you had mentioned that that one should stop doing that, but like wine, you know, especially with taking naltrexone, because I've tried it, it tastes like grape juice. I don't like it. Like, and I know that's the thing, right? I know that's what's supposed to be the thing.
Let me talk to you about what Dr. Sinclair and Dr. Escapa told me. Do you mind if I cut in? Oh, okay. So the reason why, and it's funny, there's a backstory to this. There used to be, when I first started TSM, there was a company that opened up and they were offering the Sinclair method for like $5,000. And they insisted that nobody was allowed to drink hard alcohol. And everybody thought this was a very strange thing. And it said, you know, no vodka allowed, and it was banned and all that. That company disappeared, and it was kind of sketchy and weird. And I was asking Dr. Escapa about it. And I said, so what's the deal about vodka and whiskey and everything? And both gentlemen said, look, it overwhelms the brain. Basically, you're drinking through the naltrexone. And to be quite honest, they said people who are drinking vodka aren't drinking because of the taste. They're not drinking because they like it. This was just an opinion. They said they're drinking to get loaded or to get a specific type of buzz or to black out or for other reasons. If they really, really have to drink vodka, then they can drink it with a mixer and they can have one shot of vodka, which is a unit, and then they can blend it with something and drink it slowly. He said, but predominantly they found with people who were drinking only hard alcohol, those people were drinking to get drunk. They weren't sipping a whiskey over the course of 3 hours. And also they were drinking to achieve a certain kind of feeling. So if you're taking a shot of something that's 40, 50, 60, 70, 80% alcohol, your brain is going to feel that buzz. And usually the majority of people. And if you have that sort of protection of naltrexone, you're not going to achieve that same feeling. There are some people who get a different kind of reinforcement from alcohol. I did not get that lit up brain feeling that a lot of people get, that sort of 4th of July fireworks going off, like the fellow in my documentary explains. He would get the feeling when he did a little bit of alcohol, he'd take and he would, like, his whole brain would light up. I never had that. I fell in love with wine and became a wino, and which then progressed to alcoholism. So what the point is about trying to reduce your drinking of hard alcohol is it's difficult to measure. A lot of people start getting sloppy once they have they're just free pouring. They don't know how much they're pouring. They end up drinking a lot more than they think they did. Suddenly the bottle of whiskey or gin or vodka is gone. So what the common belief is that if you're going to use hard alcohol on TSM, you need to be fastidious about measuring out units. So that means you have to get yourself a shot glass, a unit shot glass, and you have to use mixers and drink slowly. And that's the whole point, is when you're drinking a 5% beer, your brain isn't going to be overwhelmed. First of all, even if you guzzle it, it's 5% alcohol. But if you take a martini, which has 3 to 4 shots of alcohol in it, 3 to 4 units of alcohol, and drink that quickly, you're overwhelming the medication, and you're overwhelming the brain. And why are you drinking like that? You have to ask yourself, why? What am I getting from that hard alcohol? Does any of this resonate with you?
Yeah, I'm not a binge drinker. I'm like kind of a slower drinker, but I have found it, like, within these last 3 weeks to be difficult to log, specifically for the reasons that you're saying. So I appreciate what you're saying. It's just going to be a difficult shift, I guess.
You're just going to have to get a shot glass, and you're going to have to measure your units. And you're shifting to maybe, what do you drink? What kind of alcohol?
I drink gin.
Okay.
I think I really appreciated what you said. I was on a vacation with a girlfriend who drinks quite a bit this weekend, and I was trying to be compliant. And I appreciate what you said earlier about asking the question about why you're not being compliant, because I wanted to be, but my friend was like, in this different place. So I wasn't, like, I was like a half an hour off. Like, I wasn't right. I wasn't timing it right. And I appreciate just what you're saying, just checking in. Got to check in about why you're making the decisions that you're making. So thank you.
Yeah, it's really about saying, here's the thing. And once again, this is for everybody. I'm not putting you in any uncomfortable situation. And this is coming from me, somebody who took an awfully long time to get it through my thick skull, what recovery really was. If I had an incurable cancer and somebody told me that they had this magic pill, and that if I took that pill every day before I went to bed, that cancer would be in remission. I would take that pill every single night of my life. I would never miss that dosage. And I think what happens is people don't realize that alcohol use disorder is progressive and it will kill you. And this is your life-saving medication. And because alcohol is associated with partying and celebrating and friends and all that stuff, they don't take it as seriously as if it was a life-threatening cancer, but it is. So when you look at that and you can say, well, I just didn't take it because I was traveling or I forgot my pill. If you look at it with the severity and the seriousness of what it really is, now you could be very young. I don't even know how old you are, but when I was in my 20s, I thought, I drank too much, but it's not a big deal. It wasn't until my 40s when I realized, that last bender that took me to the medical detox was I could have stroked out. I lost motor control of my body. And if that's not a wake-up call, which clearly it wasn't because I relapsed in year 5 of TSM, but I mean, if that's not a wake-up call, then what is? It's because addiction is so insidious that little lizard in your brain will start telling you that you don't have a problem, that you aren't sick, that you don't have a disorder of the brain, that you're fine, that you can have a couple of beers. It's this insidious thing that addiction is. So it's unlike any other problem like leukemia or something. That's sensible. Yeah, of course I'm going to take my leukemia drugs. I want to stay in remission. I don't want to have cancer, or, I don't want to die. But with drinking, it's a whole different thing, because you have this mental aspect of this idiot in your brain telling you you're not sick. You're not an alcoholic. And so there's this horrible conundrum going on with people when they're drinking too much. They're not taking it seriously because that thing in your brain is telling you not to take it seriously. I swear, I've had people that literally tell me that there's a voice whispering in their brain to not take the naltrexone, trying to jeopardize their recovery. And that is part of that lizard that will fight tooth and nail to have you homeless, drinking out of a paper bag on the street. That's what that lizard wants. It just wants you dead or suffering with no friends, no family, no life, no money, no home. That's what it wants from you. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind. And I know that's not easy to do, and it's not a pleasant thought, but you have to look at naltrexone as your life-saving medication. I don't know how you're going to do that, but you're going to start looking at it like, this is going to save me DUIs, money, time. I'm not going to look bad. I'm not going to age prematurely. My organs aren't going to fail. This is my life-saving tablet, period. And when you start taking it that seriously, and you start keeping your drink log properly, and realizing that's a tool that actually makes your chance of recovering on TSM better. We've done data. We've taken data about this. We've researched and did an outreach program with people. And we found that people who kept their drink log for 2 years at least did better on TSM. It's accountability. It's mindfulness. So all of these tools that you have are at your disposal. It's up to you to use them. And so I think there's a way that you can find that you could mix your drinks, you could drink more slowly, you could keep your drink log up to date, you could buy a bottle of Monday fake gin, and you could maybe have one real drink and one fake drink, because it tastes great. I've done it. And all of those little tricks that everybody talks about, and little mindfulness and breaking habits and starting new ones and creating a life that doesn't involve drinking, all of those things will add up to a successful TSM experience for you. You're just hitting some bumps, and I'm sure that you'll get through them. You've got a lot of support and a lot of resources that you can utilize.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
You are so welcome. I want you to succeed in this. So just, do the best you can. Do the best you can, and don't be hard on yourself. If you're going through a hard time, reach out to somebody.
I will. Thank you.
Okay.
Such great advice, as always. Just as we get to about 20 minutes to go, I just wanted to ask you about the Hero program and how that's going. If you can give an overview to the people in the room about what the Hero program is, because C3 Foundation does so much good work that whether people know it or not, they've benefited from it. So yeah, if you could let us know about that program.
Empowering realistic outcomes. That's what the Hero program is really about. It was an idea I had to try and create some resources, financial resources for C3 Foundation, because we, as you know, we're losing sponsors all the time. People want to see their ROI. Like, what's the ROI on a banner? I'm like, you're saving lives, you idiot. So, we've lost some sponsors. So I wanted to create this thing where people would give you the price of a bottle of wine a month, or the price of a beer or a coffee or whatever. We now have 72 heroes. So that's fantastic. My goal is 300. Once we would get to 300 people at around $20 a month, we would actually be able to breathe a little bit. So that's been the program. It's just asking everybody who's been helped by the resources, or my TEDx talk, or my movie, or in any way my advocacy, or anything that this community has to offer, to understand that we are a very small grassroots nonprofit organization of 2 women with a budget of about 150,000 a year. That's what we do everything on. And that includes the podcasts and the TSM conferences, which are free, and the drink log apps, which we paid for and developed. And, all of these things that we have that we don't charge for. So we'd like to stay around. We're turning 10. We are the only global nonprofit organization completely devoted to the advocacy of the Sinclair Method. And becoming a hero just helps us do that. Some people join for $5, some join for $20. It's a monthly Give Lively setup. Once you're set up, if you down the line, if you're uncomfortable with it, it's easy to cancel. But it's just like whatever you can afford to donate per month, maybe the money that you're saving in alcohol, that's what it is. So, and I do hero talks. So I had my first, I said, once we reach 50 heroes, we'll have a get together. And I've did my first one of those a couple weeks ago. And we'll do those probably twice a year, where we all get together and have a little chat. So that's what Heroes is. It's
fantastic.
It was my effort to make things a little bit less stressful for Jenny as far as fundraising and everything, because every year we have to do these fundraisers. When I first began C3 Foundation, I was selling my memorabilia and I sold it all. My Disney memorabilia, stuff that I got from Babylon 5 and all the shows I've been doing, my crew jackets, my gifts that had been given to me on various movie sets. I sold everything just to raise money for C3. I was supporting C3 Foundation out of pocket and paying Jenny out of pocket for the first few years. When we were a one-page website, and it's not sustainable for an unemployed middle-aged actress. So that's the reality of the situation. I do this because I see the difference that it makes in people's lives, and Jenny works her butt off. And so it's not great for her mental health to have to keep raising money. That's why I wanted to do the Heroes, because it takes a lot out of her, and we end up raising like $1,500, and it's a lot of work. So if we have people giving a little bit every month, I always say this, if everybody on my Facebook fan page would give $1 a month, we would be fully funded. I have 160,000 people on that page, but they don't. So, that's why I beg, borrow, and steal.
That's great. And I think there's a few links in the chat for anybody to follow through there. I had a question from Lauren as well. A good one about the long-term component of TSM and reaching extinction, and then how many people relapse after that. I'll let Lauren ask that directly. You can unmute there, my friend.
Hi, Claudia. So my question is, so I guess I was under the impression that once somebody reaches extinction, like their brain is cured, they no longer get cravings, and that's it, you're done with alcoholism. But from what you've said on this call, it sounds like sometimes people relapse after that.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit.
Absolutely. So I like to think of it as you're in remission once you reach extinction. I don't like to think of it as cured. I like to think of that lizard in your brain as shrunken down and he's asleep. And he's very, very small. And he's going to stay asleep as long as you continue to comply with the medication. And if you do drink without the protection of naltrexone, you think of naltrexone like a condom. If you have unprotected drinking, then that little lizard's going to wake up. And then he's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And he's going to get so big, he's going to take your brain over, because he's going to relearn that addiction so quickly, because not only has he been asleep, but your brain has now been used to drinking on naltrexone, and it's actually still starving for ethanol without the blockage of naltrexone. So that's not to poo-poo this method at all. It's to tell you that this is a continual method. You don't do it for a year and you're better unless you stop drinking altogether. I don't take naltrexone because I haven't had a drink in over 4 years. So, but if I was to suddenly say I have to drink for whatever reason, I would have to take a naltrexone and wait an hour and then drink. So
do you still keep naltrexone?
I have some in the house, just because I spent so many years carrying it around on a keychain, even when I wasn't drinking, that it's like I guess you would call it a security blanket. even though I have no intention of drinking. I just would rather have some. Absolutely. I have some in the house. I haven't used it. Like I said, I'm in year 5 of abstinence, but I just have it still. Absolutely. I haven't given all of my naltrexone away. I gave most of it away, but not all of it. So to get back to your thought process. So here is the deal. If you've been on it for 2 years and you don't have any cravings and you're drinking infrequently, you could say, yes, I'm done. That drinking problem is behind me. But you would continue to take the medication if you drank. If you did not take the medication and you drank, you would relearn the addiction, and you probably would relearn it worse than what you had. That's just because the majority of people who relapse end up drinking more than they did previously, because their brain now kind of just goes crazy when they get alcohol unprotected, like pure alcohol without the blockade of naltrexone. So if that makes sense to you, you could say, I've done TSM for 4 years and I no longer drink. I'm cured. Sure. That's great. I used TSM to get sober. Absolutely. But if you're continuing to drink and you're on the Sinclair method, you are always in remission as long as you take the medication correctly. Relapsing simply means you did not take the medication. You drank without the medication. You drank alcohol without the protection of the medication, or you did it incorrectly. For instance, took the naltrexone with the first drink. A lot of people go, well, I remembered and then I took it. You have to be absolutely on top of this. You have to do it correctly every time for the rest of your life. Even if you're sober for 10 years and you go to a party and you say, you know what, I'm going to have a glass of red wine. You got to take it, wait an hour, then drink mindfully. The story never changes there, folks. It's not like all of a sudden you can fudge after 5 years. And that's what happened to me, is I got lazy. I was traveling overseas. I forgot how many hours I had been drinking. And then I took another drink. And then I said, oh, when did I take the tablet? I had a little alcohol on the airplane, and that was right. But then when I got there, I didn't take a second dose, and suddenly I got sloppy. And that led to a full-blown relapse. And that's exactly how it happened. So
did it take you another 9 months or so to get sober again, or like reach extinction?
So I couldn't drink after that relapse for quite a long time. And then I just started over from scratch. I started with a half a tablet with food, and I didn't drink. I just wanted my body to get used to naltrexone again. And I was scared to drink again, frankly. And then I waited like a week while the naltrexone was in my body. And then I took the full 50 and I had a little drink. And that's how I got back on it. I'm not recommending that for everybody. It's just, I didn't want the side effects, the potential side effects of the medication to turn me off to actually doing it correctly. That's why I titrated up. I treated it like people do now. When I first started TSM, I didn't know about titrating up. I just took 50 milligrams on an empty stomach and I felt awful for like a week. I felt horrible. I had the worst sleep. I was dizzy and I just felt out of it. Now I know, of course, that yes, you're supposed to eat something, and some people need to titrate up and get used to it. So I did that the second time around to get back on TSM.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks,
So-
Claudia.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
that's great. It's interesting. That eternal vigilance is an interesting one, and it can feel like a big burden. But as somebody who's gone through the AA journey and thought, for the next 45 years, I'm going
Yeah, you're going to a meeting every day.
7 meetings a week and sponsor 6
Yeah.
people and call my sponsor for an hour a day. I just have to take a pill an hour before I drink, on
Yeah,
the off
seems
chance that
pretty
I
easy.
drink. I can do that. I can do that.
Like a lot less of a commitment. You know, when I first met Dr. Escapa, he told me about a fellow in South Africa that he had sort of used as a guinea pig early on in the process before the book was even published. And this guy did TSM before anybody. He had, you know, he's an old timer. And that guy had been sober already. He had done TSM and he had been abstinent, and he had a special necklace made that would hold 1 tablet, and he wore it at all times. That's how seriously he took it, because Dr. Escapa basically told him, you know, this is your life-saving medication. Don't ever be without it. And even though he wasn't drinking, he had a gold chain with a little bullet that kept one tablet of naltrexone around his neck, and he always had it on him. And I think he was like in year 10 at that point. So that's how seriously people, you know, when take it. And he knew that it saved his life, so he kept it on him.
Yeah, well, I'm on that path at the moment, which is that I drink infrequently, but I have naltrexone within reach wherever I am at any given point in time, because I love the fact that I could go anywhere and drink whenever I like. I choose not to most of the time, but I love the fact that I can. It's a freedom that comes with the ability to reach naltrexone whenever I want to. And I live my life beautifully.
That's what the other thing I used to call it, my freedom pill, because the constraints of AA of telling me I could never do something for the rest of my life really didn't fit with my personality. I'm a stubborn son of a gun. So when somebody said, you can never do that, I was like, oh, I'll find a way to do it. And I did. And that was the Sinclair method, you know.
We sound very similar.
We are. If I could do it all over again, though, if I could do the Sinclair method all over again, I would definitely do it with a lot more mindfulness and a lot more inner work. And I would have reached where I am now probably a lot sooner. But then again, I wouldn't be able to tell you my war stories.
Which is a great point. A lot of the things that I would say to anybody on these calls are the mistakes that I've made. They're not the things that I did beautifully. They're the mistakes I made and thought, if I had my time again, I would tell you this. And that's what I'm telling them. Josh had a good question just about pills. So talking about the longevity of pills. Josh, did you want to ask that directly?
Yeah, I was just wondering if people, you know, the necklace is a great story, but how long do these pills maintain potency, you know, over years? You know, how many years can that last and it still work? If I have a pill on me for 3 years, will it lose enough potency not to work?
I don't think so. I mean, I've spoken to my compounder. I still have these 25 milligram pills that I compounded for somebody because they needed 75, and I think they're still potent. I mean, I had some expired naltrexone when I was in India with Dr. Escapa, and he's like, don't worry about it, take it. You know, so I had a beer with him, you know, and back in 2016. And I took the expired naltrexone. I mean, you know, pharma companies put an expiration date on it. I've taken aspirin that's from like the 90s. And I mean, I'm sure at some point there's a physiological thing that goes on within the medication that it might expire or make you sick if it's really, really old. But I think if it's like a year past its date, I've heard from various doctors, like, don't worry about it. Even a couple of years past its date, I don't think it's going to lose its potency. It's naltrexone, it's generic. The fillers are usually stabilizers that are in the tablet. They're usually things that provide stability to the structure, the integrity of the medication. So that should make it last a long time. I'm not an expert at this, by the way. I mean, you can Google it probably or ask your doctor, but I think that one of the reasons that expiration dates are put on everything is to sell more products, you know?
Yeah. I put this in the bucket of lovely problems to have. I've had this pill in my pocket and haven't drunk for 18 months. I wonder if it's expired. Gee, that's a lovely problem to have.
Great.
When you get to that point, you're doing well.
I had my old bubble foil packs of Nodict in my this one that I had ordered online from India years ago, from when I first started TSM. And I still had one little strip of them in my European wallet, as I call it, when I would travel, for probably 12 years. And I took one of the last years that I drank alcohol when I was in Europe. I took one and it worked. So I mean, that medication must have been 9 years old. So I don't know. I mean, it didn't hurt me. I'm perfectly normal. I did want to talk to anybody out there quickly. I wanted to mention that I have had so many more clients recently that had weight loss surgery. So anybody out there who's had weight loss surgery, please, please, please be aware that they are only now recently, doctors are telling weight loss surgery candidates and clients, patients to not drink alcohol. You cannot drink alcohol if you've had weight loss surgery, period. The cases of people developing alcohol use disorder in record time are in the millions. I cannot tell you how many people I am working with right now currently that suddenly said, oh my God, I never had a drinking problem. Then I had weight loss surgery and now I'm like off to the racetracks. I can't stop. I'm drinking around the clock. It is really scary. And doctors are like I said, most doctors aren't even warning people that this is a beyond a high risk. This is like so probable that if you drink after weight loss surgery, you will develop an alcohol use disorder. It's so probable, and they're not telling people. And that is so it's really, really, really ticks me off. So just be hyper aware that if you or a loved one has weight loss surgery, don't drink.
That's good advice. We've had a number of people come through the group with a situation where that they have developed a problem after weight loss surgery.
I know.
And I've not heard that that level of certainty about just.
Oh my gosh.
Don't do it.
There's literally, out of all the clients that I've had, only one person was warned by their doctor. One person, and that was a man, and he was told, don't drink alcohol from now on. And he said, okay, and he didn't. So he didn't develop an alcohol use disorder. However, his wife, who also had the surgery, wasn't told the same thing, and now she's having a problem. So please keep that in mind and don't play around with it. It's really nasty. They learn it quickly and really badly.
Yeah, that's good advice. Anyone on the call with that? Yeah, hopefully you can heed that warning. And so Andy had a question. The recent announcement around Narcan. Andy, if you want to ask that question directly.
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. So yeah, with the recent I guess over the counter with Narcan, do you think that there's going to be any sort of effect that that'll have on potentially making some sort of headway for
we would certainly hope that now that naloxone is over the counter, that would pave the way for naltrexone. But once again, that requires money. It requires lobbying. It requires trying to get people to do that. It requires research. I'm sure some of you have seen recently in the news, there were some studies done with a small group of men using targeted use of naltrexone, and that got a little press. All of these things certainly help. It helps, but it takes somebody with resources to actually spearhead that movement. I know that there's going to be for-profit different delivery systems of naltrexone and naloxone used for compulsive disorders of the brain, everything from eating disorders to self-harm, coming out hopefully in the next few years. So let's hope that that wave of new devices and new delivery systems will also mean that eventually the FDA and other avenues will consider naltrexone to be innocuous enough and helpful enough to have over the counter. I don't see why it shouldn't be, and you obviously don't see why it shouldn't be, but there's a lot of hurdles to cross in order to get that legal standing. Naloxone is thought of more of a lifesaver than harm reduction. And that's another obstacle, is that you're saying naloxone is saving somebody from overdosing and dying, whereas naltrexone is giving people permission to drink alcohol. It is classic harm reduction. You could argue and say, but it's saving lives. It saved my life. I know that. But, you know, there's a lot of different opinions going into this mix. But let's hope that it will pave the way for a greater open-mindedness surrounding these opiate antagonists and making them over the counter. I foresee a future where this isn't going to be an issue. Right now, there's a lot of heavy hitters that that, you know, that would probably lobby against it. I can think of a few, like the rehab industry.
Yeah, that's great. And naloxone, just for anyone who's unfamiliar with that, is what they use to save people's life when they're in an opioid overdose, but it works on the same receptors. There's no rough explanation of what it is, but it's now over the counter.
We actually did use naloxone in a lot of the alcohol studies because, you know, the nasal spray of naloxone can be used also for alcohol. You would just have to understand the dosage and the time that it would last, but that would also bypass the liver. So if you spray an opiate blocker, when I compounded naltrexone, I sprayed it up my nose, and lo and behold, it blocked my desire to drink for a shorter amount of time, and it was not passed through my liver. So I was using myself as a human guinea pig. Well, now they're going to do that with naloxone, and you know, hopefully get great results. So we'll see what the future holds for this, but I don't see them going away. I see them getting stronger and more people monetizing it. And let's just hope that, you know, that generic naltrexone remains available for people.
Yeah, a step in the right direction. So we're nearing the 90 minutes. And as you know, I always like to finish roughly on time because I want you to be able to come back and know that we won't kidnap you forever. But I wanted, is there anything pressing about TSM or C3 Foundation or anything that you'd like to get across to the group that I haven't asked about or somebody else hasn't?
Just that we've literally lost about a fifth of our funding in the past 3 months. We had 3 sponsors pull out. So if anyone can dig up $5 a month or $10 a month and become a hero, it would be unbelievably helpful. It's very stressful when you're on that small of a budget per year to be able to do things that you want to do and provide the resources that you want to provide and have like one sponsor. You know, we had $20,000 worth of sponsorship disappear overnight. And that to us on $100,000 budget, that's huge. It's huge. So yeah, that's the most pressing thing of all that's really stressing Jenny out right now, is how to balance our budget and go forward instead of backwards. And it's not very heartening. We launched that big fundraiser, that our $100,000 fundraiser, and I think we've raised 20,000, and 10 of that actually comes from a woman who gives us $10,000 every year. So it's like we did all this work and we got like 10 grand. And you know, it's I know it's hard for people and it's tough times and all that stuff, but I just want to gently remind people of the money that they're saving from not drinking so much, and maybe to give back in order to make that part of your recovery. I know that the 13 years that I've been giving back has done an enormous amount of help in my own recovery. I think it's an act of mindfulness and an act of love to help people that are maybe in a stage that you were going through a little while back. And if that means monetary help or volunteering, whatever, then I recommend it. It's good for the soul. But other than that, you know, we've been, I'm still trying to work on a couple of things. I'm training more coaches. We're having a problem getting some of the international coaches up because they can't get insurance and we can't afford to put them on our insurance. So I really want to add, I have a Spanish speaking one. I've got a Dutch speaking one. I've got a French speaking one, and I'd love to add these new coaches in different time zones for different people. But it's the insurance issue right now. So I have been training a lot of people, which is fantastic. I think I've trained 8 people this year alone. That means that people really are keen to help other people after going through TSM themselves, which is really exciting.
Oh, that's great. And yeah, it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Whenever I hear about people think about any recovery method and the cost associated with it, as soon as you get into rehab, you're talking about $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. At even the highest level estimate of TSM cost is cheap. But it's only cheap because of people like C3 Foundation, who have created the foundation for people to be able to work on top of. but it's hard to create the connection between those things.
Well, we that's another thing. I really want to raise money to do this sort of PSA that we've been noodling around with, where we want to go and try and get the people who are not the ones suffering from alcohol use disorder, but everybody else. So I want to do a PSA where, for instance, you see the person who wasn't hit by the drunk driver, or the person who wasn't beaten by the person who was inebriated, or the child who wasn't adversely affected by the parent who was, drinking too much. So I want to sort of hit those people and say, don't do it for that. Because let's face it, it's not sexy. People will give to puppy foundations and turtles, but not alcoholics. So I want to kind of make it resonate with them that you're not just helping the alcoholic, you're helping everybody that the alcoholic is not negatively affecting. So that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around, creating a PSA about that, to maybe attract people who won't just outwardly give to a foundation that is trying to save the lives of alcoholics. I care about alcoholics. Okay. I want them to have a second chance at life. I want them to live life to the fullest. I don't want people to be drinking themselves to death or losing more time. I lost over a decade of my life, and I want those years back, and I can't get them ever again. So I don't want that to happen to a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old. I don't want that to happen to any of you on this call. I don't want you to lose another day. It's a horrible feeling when you go to bed at night and think, oh my God, what could I have done with that 15 years where I was drinking myself to death? What could I have accomplished? Who would I have been if I didn't have a drinking problem? That's a really hard thing to live with. So I don't want any of you to waste that time that I wasted.
Yeah, it's partly depressing and partly inspiring. It's a strange thought, isn't it?
Yeah, it's extremely inspiring when I think I could save a young person from losing that much time, but it's also extremely upsetting to me that I lost what is known as the best years of your life to drinking.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
You can do all the Instagram ready slogans you want, like, but now is terrific. Yeah, you have your life in front of you and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm not 35, and I wish I had that time back again. But I don't. So you have to make, every day special.
Well, speaking of time, we absolutely appreciate your time today. And I know that on behalf of everybody on this call, thank you very much. Everybody gets very excited when you come on the calls. And afterwards, there's a whole lot of talk about the things that you've spoken about, and every call thereafter, somebody says, well, Claudia said this and this and this, and it spreads and it goes on, and we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. And you're a wonderful host. I say this every time, but you really are. You're calm, cool, and collected, and generous of spirit, and you're giving back to the community in such a beautiful way. And everybody who's participating in these meetups, you're doing a favor to everyone else by sharing your own complex relationship to alcohol, and also your journey on the Sinclair Method, because every time somebody shares something, somebody else maybe resonates with it, a little bit of it. And the more we communicate and the more we share the good, the bad, and the ugly, the more we can all come to form a recovery of our own that works for us. So I just wish you all the best, and please be kind to yourself, ask for help, set boundaries. Please don't be that yes person. Sure, I'll pick you up at the airport. Take time for yourself. Don't be that person who feels guilty because they were drinking too much, and so now they're going to overcompensate by not taking care of themselves. Don't be that person. Just try and be nice to yourself, and take this time to really be kind to yourself and loving to yourself, and learn how to communicate. That's one of the most important things in recovery. Learn how to communicate your needs.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank
What
you.
a wonderful.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody. Andy, Hannah, thank you, everybody. Laura, Dana, thank you for your questions. Yeah, it was really beautiful. I love doing it.
We broke our attendance record today, Claudia. You'll be pleased to know.
Woo!
You know who set the previous attendance record?
Who?
You. So
I'm beating myself. Woo! Well, let's go for another record.
exactly. We would love to do that. Absolutely.
We'll do another one in I'm having surgery in May, so I'll be sort of stuck at home. We'll do another meeting then. Okay.
You let us know when you're available and we will.
I refused all pain medications, so I'll just be on Tylenol and I'll be in agony.
Well, this could be fun.
Yeah, the doctor literally said to me, he said, so we'll send you home with oxycodone. And I was like, no, you won't. No, you won't. I've already had one addiction, buddy. You're not going. I'll take my Tylenol. Thank you very much. Yeah. So
well, good luck with the surgery. Yeah, I hope it goes well. Everybody I know that's had knee or hip replacement surgery always says afterwards, I wish I'd done it earlier.
I wish
they feel amazing.
Yeah, I know. I wish I had done it. I've been in pain for 7 years and the shot stopped working. So it's time to do it. But, you know, around mid-May, I'll be ready to chat to all of you again.
We will be absolutely ready for you as well. And yeah, we wish you well in the meantime.
And for all of those of you that celebrate Easter, happy Easter this weekend. New beginnings.
Wonderful.
Rebirth.
Indeed. Rebirth.
All right. Thank you so much.
Claudia.
Bye.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Well.